Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond Breakthrough. My name is Laika Ferry and I'm also your host. And today we are celebrating Gerard Milano for being with us today. We're going to be talking about how he went from an average part timer to a first time self published author, where he retells his stories and life lessons from working multiple minimum wage jobs in his debut book, Skills That Don't Pay the Bills, a collection of short stories from the average part timer. We're going to go ahead and talk about his personal journey that led him to writing this book, his self publishing experience, and what he hopes to impact the world with his story, especially as a Filipino on a very non conventional path in life. So, Gerard, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your book.
Hey, my name is Gerard. As like I just said, I'm 22 years old, and I'm turning 23 in October. Um, and yeah, so basically, I was in college, but I'm taking a little break right now in between degrees, practically, right? Um, so and during that time, during while I was in college, it was over the course of 4 years, right? I wanted to be able to challenge myself, right? So my parents, I proposed a challenge to my parents, right? And that is, if I can pay my for my college without having to go into debt, without having to go into take out the student loans, and without having to get a ton of help from them, right? So while they may have helped, and while my scholarships paid for most of it, and so did FAFSA, I still had to pay quite a lot for the tuition. So I took on these jobs, right? And while it may be at first just to pay them off, I experienced quite a lot, and I learned quite a lot. And I think that a lot of people would benefit from learning from my experiences and my stories, and just essentially seeing what they can expect going into these jobs, especially if you're a person who is maybe like just getting into your first job, summer job or something like that. I think somebody will definitely benefit from this book.
Awesome. Well, I'm already very curious about some of the jobs that you've had. I know you mentioned that you've done a lot of them, but I'm curious, like, how varied were they? What were some of the odd jobs that you took on?
So it's not really like odd. It's pretty conventional, I would say, and they never really veered away from retail and fast food, right? The unconventional part is the stories that I have to tell, right? So over the course of 4 years, I took on 8 jobs, and there's 8 sections to this book, right? They range from like the first job I've ever had is Chipotle, and I was the guy who makes your burritos, right? And I definitely I definitely had
It's an
some.
important guy.
Oh yeah, definitely. You'd want somebody to take care of you if you want pinto beans or instead of black beans, right? So, uh, but yeah, and it's also kind of a learning journey, right? Because I've never experienced or I never worked a job before Chipotle, and I definitely had some stuff to learn, right? Like one of the stories here, one of the first stories, in fact, was the night that I spilled a bunch of beans onto the little table thing because they were so hot, right? Uh, yeah, and we ended up staying for quite a while just to clean that up, right? And in that story, I mentioned how I didn't know that after after closing that we still had to clean. Like, I mean, obviously, duh. To people who have worked jobs before, they're like, well, you obviously you got to clean. I was like, well, I thought somebody else did that for us. I was
Oh.
that clueless.
I
Yeah.
think all been there because that I relate to that. My first job was working as a front desk receptionist at a veterinary clinic. I'm like, oh, this is super cool. Like I work with the animals and I get to kind of see some of the procedures that happen and all
Yeah.
that. But then they were like, oh, you have to stay after work to clean like the bathrooms and
Yeah.
the vet rooms. And I was in that same spot where I was like, oh, I thought we had like a dedicated janitor who came in
Oh
like
yeah.
every day to do that. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So, and if there's one piece of advice that's, a completely off book, right, that I can give to people going into these jobs, it's that, for minimum wage, it's never really what you expect, right? They tell you one thing, right? And then, it's a different thing that eventually happens, right? I think
Mm,
the first time it's actually been real that what they tell you is what the job is my current job, right? So I currently work at the Luxor, right, that big pyramid hotel in Las Vegas, as a front desk agent, and that's literally all you do, right? You stand all day and then work with a computer, and then that's it. You don't have to clean afterwards. You don't need to carry heavy stuff. You don't need to, yeah, and that's pretty much it. And that job actually required my bachelor's degree. So yeah.
so with 8 different jobs that you've experienced, I'm sure there are hundreds of stories that you could have chosen to go into
Hmm.
this book. So how did you choose which stories to tell in your book?
So well, so I started this project over a year ago, actually. Back when I was working at one of the jobs here, right? I was working at Planet Fitness, and I sat down and I thought, like, what if I can make, like, this kind of project, right? And so that one night I started like writing down, right, the stories that I could tell,
Mm,
and like I had, like you said, I had an entire list, right? And it was so I took my notebook, I listed down like what I could write, and that list, I don't know if I can find it, but it's somewhere in my room here. But that list was probably about 6 or 7 pages long of just doodling and handwriting, and plotting out the stories that I would tell. And I had maybe about, I don't know, 80 or so ideas, right? And I started cherry picking them, right? And here's my process on how to cherry pick that, right? I was like, is this really like anything of significance? Did I learn something from this experience or this interaction? No, cross it out.
mm,
Second, is this story gonna drag on for too long? Is yes, then cross out, right? And third, if is this story like, well, I mean, like, I just thought, hey, is this story like, is there like content here? Like, can I talk about other things with
mm.
this story, or is it just gonna drag on too much, right? Like, is it gonna, like, not necessarily like too long of a story, but like, is it gonna, like, bore people out of their minds, right?
That sounds like a very cathartic way to pick your stories. And that makes me curious. Like this epiphany that happened, was that all you, or were there other mentors and influences that helped you gradually build this book?
Uh, well, because I throughout my entire experience working, right, whenever there's a downtime at work or anything, right, I always like to tell people stories. I always like to talk to my coworkers and be like, hey, so did you know that this thing happened to my job? Or like, if there's a rude customer, right, I would be like, I would. Obviously, everyone talks trash about rude customers, right? So whenever I would do that afterwards, I was like, oh, you know what? That customer reminds me of this one job I used to do, and this is, and this and this and this, right? And I was like, oh, did you know that this like, oh, Chipotle or Taco Bell did this and this and this, right? So I liked telling those stories, right? And one day, like, because I've always wanted to write my own book, and I've been trying to write a book since like what 2015, right?
Mhm.
Back when we were we were still in high school, right? I've been trying to write a book, and I realized slowly, right, that my thing is not fiction, right? I'm not good at writing fiction, so I decided, hey, why not write nonfiction based on all these stories I had, right? So it sort of came to me just at a snap of a finger one night. I'm like, huh, that is a good idea for a book, you know? So yeah, that's when I started plotting it out, but I didn't think I'd actually go through with the entire thing. And here we are a year later, and now it's actually a physical thing that I'm holding, you know?
That's such an incredible journey because there's a lot of people who will say a ton of stuff that they'll do, and then there's people who will actually do it. And I think you're a great example of that.
Thank you.
But I'm also curious as to whether or not your family and friends were supportive of this book writing journey that you were going on. And I ask that because in our culture as Filipinos, the creative arts, especially if there's not like an instant monetary,
Oh
re-
yeah.
you know, exchange that happens
Hmm.
right away, they're like, why are you wasting your time doing that? Or you should focus on this instead. Like,
Oh yeah.
how did that, what was that dynamic with your family?
Well, so for the entire year that I was writing this, it was completely secretive. I was the only one who knew.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes.
So,
None of my friends, none of my family.
wow, that see with me, I would have not been able to keep it under wraps. I'd just be so excited and want feedback. And I think sometimes asking for that external validation can hold us back, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, cuz like my mom has known that I've wanted to write a book for a while, right? I've been talking to her about, hey, I'm starting a new project, right? Yada yada yada, and then it never comes to fruition, right? So, anytime I think up until a couple of years ago, anytime I told her that I'm starting a new book project, or I have an idea in my head, she started to like doubt me, right?
Mhm.
So she's like, like I just want you to, like, if you're gonna do it, just do it, right? Instead of just talking about it, and like, but essentially, she challenged me, like, to prove to her that, hey, prove to me that you can do this, right? And so, like, I didn't talk about writing another book until I finished one, right? And she kind of forgot that I used to say, hey, I'm gonna write a book, or I'm gonna write, have a new idea or something like that.
Mhm.
um and like, for the most part, right, like I said, she forgot about it. She doesn't remember much. And then suddenly I just dropped this thing on her. I'm like, yo, I wrote a book.
I
you know and that was when, like, she got all excited. She got very supportive, right? Because, yeah, because if you're still in the process, right, my parents are typically like, oh, I want to see it done, you
Right.
know
Mhm.
so
I think
don't bring anything up to them until it's done.
I think that's a
Yeah.
running theme with a lot of traditional households, especially in like Asian communities as well, where
Yeah.
you can say all that you want and they're going to have a natural resistance because a lot of our families come from backgrounds where they had to really struggle and grind to create a comfortable life for their family, and they are projecting the things that they have understood and experienced in their own life. So I think it's incredible that you were able to keep everything under wraps and that you received so much support and love after it was produced. And I think
Yes.
that's a very similar story that I can relate to as well because I was a content marketing writer and they had no idea what I was doing. But then when they started seeing the fruit of those labors, they became a
Hmm.
lot more supportive. So I totally get you there.
Yeah.
So, what kept you going when you were writing this book? Because, a lot of people start books and they're hard to finish. People
Oh
talk
yeah.
about all the time that they only get to the beginning or they like know how to end it, but they don't know the rest of it. So, what
Yeah.
were those challenges that you faced and what helped you complete this project?
So I've definitely had times when what's it called? I because I started and stopped this book probably more times than I care to admit, right? At least 20 times, right? And there was maybe like a, a few points in the book where I was just like, screw this project. I'm not gonna finish it. Nobody's gonna care anyway, right? So it's that doubt in my head, like that when I publish this, right, nobody's gonna care, right? They're gonna be like, okay, whatever. Everybody writes books, So in my head, I'm just like, oh, okay. So what's even the point, right? And at one point, it felt like I was like rambling on and on and on about these jobs, right? And and somebody's probably gonna say, hey, everybody has bad experiences with a job. Like, what makes you special? So those doubts in my head is definitely what stopped me, right? But then, eventually, like from time to time, I would come to realize that, hey, like somebody's probably gonna read this and say, oh, this has been so important to me, because like a lot of people, they read books, and then it changes them, right? It changes their life, it changes their perspective. So for me, I wanted to do something similar, right? And that's kind of what kept me going, right? And there's also like the what's it called, the big issue of writer's block, right? And you don't know what to, like you said, some writers know how to start it, some writers know how to end it, they just don't know how to do the middle part, right? For me, it's kind of a unique situation because I already know the stories, right? I already have the stories, and I know how to tell them, but I just don't know if it's going to be received well, right? Because it can, like I said, it can come off as just me complaining about stuff, and how everybody has these problems, like what's so special about my experience, right? but yeah, but then I just like put my head down, and I think the most important thing is just to let yourself keep writing, just keep writing and going and going and going. Any doubt you may have, just push it aside for later, and then once your book is done, just take a look at it, right? Make some edits, and then basically don't care what other people think. This is your journey, this is your book, this is your thing, right? So you write it, you do it if you want.
Right. I am so glad that you said that because it correlates directly to one of my favorite encouraging quotes where your first draft is basically you telling yourself the story. Like that's
Hmm.
kind of how to keep going even when you feel like perfectionism is getting in the way and writer's block is getting in the way and things like that. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be personal for that first time around. Like, okay, how do I personally tell this story? So
Yeah.
with that said, that flows right into my next question. Who is this book for, and what's the impact that you hope this is going to make on them?
So this book is for everybody who has ever suffered or is planning to suffer through through one of these jobs, right? Minimum wage jobs. I think most people have had to work it, right? Even if you're working in a fancy, prestigious CEO or whatever job, that you're currently working in now, everybody has had a job history, right? That's how you build up your resume. That's how you get the prestigious jobs that you have right now, right? So this book is for teenagers who might be getting into their first minimum wage job, or people who have worked these jobs for years, right? Saying hey, somebody's here for you, somebody relates to you, and I'm here to open up these experiences. And the second purpose of this book is also to bring into light, right, the according to my description at the back of the book, is to bring into light the jobs that keep America running, right? Because while CEOs and managers and big businesses is important, without their floor workers, without the people at the they call it the bottom there, right, the bottom of the food chain, there wouldn't be a corporation, there wouldn't be a CEO, right, if it weren't for the hardworking people at the minimum wage, So yeah, so this is kind of, yeah, for the job industry essentially.
But you know what? I think this is such a great message to share with my audience and entrepreneurs all across the globe as well. Because, like you mentioned, there are CEOs, there are people who are running their own businesses, and they work with the people who are in the helm, they're in the thick of it.
Yes.
And I think it would benefit them so much to get that intimate, firsthand story, that experience of how it feels like to be working in these big corporations, and
Yes.
in in lower and high level, and getting that perspective shift, so that's very powerful. So what encouragement or advice would you give to someone who is interested in writing their own book?
Um. Well, there's a lot of people who would maybe say like, oh, do it this and this and this way, right? Like the so-called writing experts, right? And they're like, oh, this is how you should do it, blah blah blah, right? But the truth is, everyone has their own techniques. Everyone has their own way of doing things, right? So for me, I wrote this book, right? There's still like, as I'm reading this, because I edited and formatted this myself. I'm still finding a bunch of mistakes, right? That I'm, eventually gonna get to editing, because I'm only one person, right? And I don't have like a big team of editors. But yeah, so and I wrote this book in a way that makes it seem like I'm talking to you, or like I'm texting you, right? As a person, right? Instead of like having a bunch of like, you know, sophisticated language, or
Right.
this paragraph has to be this length or whatever, right? So this is me speaking to you as a person, right? In writing format, so basically everyone has their styles, right? So just do you, right? If you feel like you're more comfortable writing a certain style, then definitely do that, right? And if you feel more comfortable writing, following proper grammar rules, then yeah, definitely do that. But the most important thing is to just start. Pull up Microsoft Word. Don't even worry about how to format it for publishing yet, right? Pull up Microsoft Word or whatever have you, right? And then just start writing, right? Anything however you want. You can always revise it later, right? Because while you can edit a finished book, you can't edit a blank page, you know
Yeah. Hmm. Words of
so
wisdom here. Thank you so
thank
much, Gerard. That was very enlightening, and I think very
thank you.
encouraging for those out there who have been playing with the idea, but just something is blocking their first step or even that finishing step. So I want to
Yes.
dive a little bit deeper into the self-publishing route, because
Hmm.
obviously that I feel like is the most budget-friendly way to go, right? Because you can spend
Yes.
thousands and thousands of dollars for a publishing company to do everything and market it and all of that. So what has been your experience going self-published, and would you recommend that to a first-time writer?
So yeah, so I mean, well, if you're a first time writer who definitely has the resources and has the money to, go to a publishing company, right? Then definitely do it, right? That is, if you can pitch your book in a good way, right? But as a first time writer, I don't know how to pitch my book. I don't know where to start, right? I may have taken on communications as a major, right? But pitching a book is a whole different ball game. You have to, not only do you, because like for most of my time doing these presentations for class, right, for my communications class, right, I was able to go off of my professor's scoring card, right, while publishers have their own technique, right? They don't write down points, right? they
Mhm.
they deduce you, and they listen to you, right? And they listen to, hey, is this worth publishing, right? But the truth is, right, you don't have to be associated with a publishing company to be an actual author, right? So I chose self-publishing. I published my book through KDP, that's Kindle Direct Publishing, right? It's a great service that Amazon provides. But yeah, so like I said, I edited the book myself. I formatted the book myself. And how did I do that? I looked through YouTube videos. If you see my search history, all around YouTube, you would see like how to self-publish book, how to format book for KDP, right? How do I, how do I do this and how do I do that? And I even got it down to designing the book cover, right? I designed this, right? So
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, and it also helps that I took on animation back in high school, so that's how I designed this book. But yeah, so it's basically it's ironic enough that the book is called Skills That Don't Pay the Bills, right? But I used my skills to pay the bills by publishing this book, right?
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
that's something to be celebrated. So what's the next step from here, Gerard? Your book is written.
yes.
You're over at Luxor right now, welcoming
Hmm.
guests. What
Hmm.
is the future for Gerard Milano?
The future for Gerard Milano. Well, okay, so basically, I'm deciding where to take my degree. If I could do maybe like some postgraduate stuff, like a master's degree or something like that. And I recently watched that movie Tick Tick Boom on Netflix, right? And basically I'm taking a page out of Jonathan Larson's book and writing the next one.
Okay.
So
All
yeah,
right.
so
So we have something to look forward to. Where
yes.
can our audience connect with you and follow your journey?
Well, I'm on Instagram, right, at Electrowimp, ELECTROWIMP. That's pretty much my handle for all other social medias. You can find me on Facebook as well. That's where I most advertise a lot of the stuff I'm working on. But you're probably not going to get any updates from my book until I finish
Oh,
it, because that's just,
okay.
that's how I like to do
Style.
it. Oh yeah, definitely. However, I can give you a little bit of a sneak peek into the next two books because I'm working on two.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah. So first one is it's the format of this first book, right? Which is a collection of short stories, but this time about school, right? And the other one is I'm working on a fiction book, or trying to at least. Uh,
You're doing it, yeah.
so Oh yeah, definitely. And that's pretty much just, writing the next one is what I'm working on right now.
I like how you're challenging yourself to go fiction because you mentioned, I think earlier, where
Yeah.
it wasn't your strong suit, but you're challenging
Yeah.
yourself again, which is
Yes.
fantastic.
And
Do you?
currently I've scrapped probably like 10 drafts of the first chapter. But
I feel that.
I'm going. I'm still going,
Awesome. Okay. Well, Gerard, thank you so much for bringing your breakthroughs here with us today. We've been inspired, we are encouraged and empowered, and we thank you for that. All right. Until next time, thank
Alrighty.
you guys for watching, and we will see you beyond.